going to talk about the role of finance department in healthcare institutions. So, it's kind of what I look like here. I kind of frame this up the many hats of a hospital CFO. So the areas of responsibility of the hospital CFO is pretty much cover the areas of responsibility of the finance department. So operations, kind of the trains running on time, board of directors, relationships, got your top hat, finance and treasury, you grow your garden, grow the portfolio, accounting and financial reporting. I guess the policeman's hat should be somewhat obvious. Financial analysis, a lot of mining of data. So kind of got the miner's hat, and then strategic planning and budgeting, right, looking into the future. So I think it's important just to know and understand how the finance department interacts with the rest of the institution and their area of responsibility. So the most traditional one, you should have covered this in healthcare finance one, accounting and financial report. So accounting, maintain the financial records of the organization. We've got our basic financial statements. There's a separate lecture to review this. You should have covered this in the first course. There's a separate lecture and video if you need to be get your mind refreshed with respect to the statement of revenue expenses, the P&L, balance sheet. So again, just in summary, the statement of revenue and expenses, the profit and loss. Are we making money over a given time span? The balance sheet, where do we stand today? Our assets, accounts receivable, what do we own, what do we owe people? Cash flow, outlining just changes in cash from period to period. Really important statement. Big picture focus. If these terms aren't immediately recognizable to you, please review the supplemental video because it's crucial that you understand this to fully appreciate where we're going with the rest of the semester here. Financial reporting, you know, internally it's primarily actual versus budget reporting. Um, Hopefully the CFO and his team are communicating that monthly, at least really internally it should be monthly. Some do quarterly, but I don't think you can move fast enough. Um, the CFO, it's hard to really control revenue. Um, so a lot of the focus is on expenses, just kind of the nature of the beast in healthcare. Um, and we'll talk about that in the future. I mean, you can't you can't just lower your prices like McDonald's can to bring more people in. You can't just say we're gonna add a free fries with every order of a burger and a Coke. Um, and having been a CFO, we get frustrated because we can't really control volume. Um, but volume drives the institution. So again, the bottom line is there's a lot of internal focus on expenses because we can try to work on that. Strategic and planning and budgeting, we're going to cover those chapters 8 and 14. Um, you know, what you have to understand is the budget, it's really a financial representation of the strategic and operational plan. We're going to go deep into that. You got your strategic plan, you know, then you got your capital budget. We're going to talk about that, your operation, your financial. So directing this process is the role of the finance department. They should help coordinate the overall assumptions that are used by staff. Again, we'll talk more in detail. Um, they're going to take an active role in working with the managed care department about the revenue. Um, you know, one kind of nerd out here. One of the things that's kind of neat to see over the years is the tremendous improvement in the budgeting process. Since I was first in a finance department at a hospital, um, with just real-time reporting, very interactive, modeling with the cost accounting system, as opposed to when I started, it was almost done in the back room. But now it's very interactive with the clinical operations, and we'll talk more about that later. Operations. So this is where I really enjoyed my time in finance. The most significant one is oversight of the revenue cycle. We're going to talk about that, chapter 16, and a complete additional supplemental lecture on the revenue cycle. So, in short, we'll go into this. It's basically from managed care contracting through patient registration, billing, charge capture, et cetera, through the bank reconciliation. And what we're going to do is go into the detail of that. But this is kind of the major operational role of the finance department. It typically revenue cycle, the billing department reports the finance. It cannot be, but it typically does. Um, um, EMRs have really smoothed things out. In the old days, I used to have to chase the clinical team for their charges. It was all manual. Now it just happens. Other operational areas, accounts payable, paying the bills. IT, yes and no, it depends on the organization. I think before EMRs, when IT was mostly focused on revenue cycle and billing systems, it tended to go to the CFO. Now with EMRs, it often goes to the chief operating officer. So that's kind of been a shift. Payroll should be the CFO, and the HR and benefits. Sometimes you see it the CFO, sometimes the COO, probably more now COO, Chief Operating Officer, than it used to be. But payroll should, you really should have segregation between HR and payroll. But those are kind of the major operational issues. Financial analysis, this is what I call the fun stuff. We're going to be a major focus of the class, chapters 5, 6, 7, and 15. It's really digging into the operational data to discover what's going on. In the old days, we had limited resources to do that. Now it's just amazing, especially with the EMR feeding the analytical systems, and we'll go into that. Just wealth of data now, much more sophisticated to be able to run an operation and understand where costs are and what's going on. Finance and treasury, it's kind of like, how am I going to pay for this stuff? What's the funding strategy of the institution? How do we fund operations? Through services, profitability of our services, through donations if you're not for profit, loans, bonds, bank financing, investment income, borrowing versus leasing. All these type of issues are a function of the finance department managing the banking relationship. If you issue debt, the bond rating. What's the bond rating? This question's come up. It's basically like your credit score, your Equifax score. So they can have significant impact. So the better your bond rating, the lower your cost of debt. So if you're a AAA, which is the highest, your interest is going to be lower. We'll talk about that relationship between debt and risk. If you're of a very low bond rating, you're going to pay more interest to induce people to buy your bonds. So it's just like your credit score. If you go into someplace with a high credit score. You go into a car dealer with a high credit score to get a mortgage, you're probably going to pay a lower interest cost financing than if you come in with a bad kind of lower, let's call it lower credit. Obviously, managing growing the investment portfolio, hospitals, institutions really struggle to make money from their core operations. It's increasingly harder to make a profit on the basic provision of clinical services. So, really, to make or break it is the income from the investments and or donations. So the board of directors is kind of the final kind of hat. So the CFO has a couple of relationships to the board, absent his or her relationship to the chief executive officer. So there's usually there's always a finance and audit committee of the board of directors that the CFO would would interact directly to the board without any interference from the CEO, theoretically. And that's a very important relationship to the board. Reporting financial results, obviously, the chief financial officer is the one who typically reports financial results to the board. And then, whatever role in strategic planning. So it's very important to understand this. The CFO does have these separate relationships to the board. However, they've got to follow the CEO's lead, as the CEO has the primary responsibility for interacting with the board of directors. So it's kind of a tricky, can be a tricky thing. In the context, a lot of CFOs basically serve as the treasurer of the institution as one of their titles, and that gives them that independent relationship. However, you don't want to be at odds with the CEO, as long with respect to the strategic direction. I would think of the hospital or the institution, and you've got to maintain your integrity, and we'll get into that in the very last lecture. Could be somewhat of a balancing act, but in all things, you have to maintain your integrity. It it can be tricky. You have to exercise your fiduciary duty with integrity, yet at the same time, not openly war with the CEO, if we can put it that way. Kind of an interesting story. I I was doing, it's a long story. I was doing private investment work for a woman who was the chairman of the finance committee of the board of directors at a hospital. And she was extremely wealthy. She had a private boutique investment group, and I was writing business plans for her, kind of as a side job. So I would do the financial analysis, and we got along really well. And the CFO of the hospital left, and there was an opening for CFO at this hospital. So the woman was favorable to the work that I did and asked me if I would be interested in the job. And I was eminently qualified for the job. I interviewed, but that CEO did not want me because of my relationship with the woman who was chairman of the finance committee. It was just obvious that he didn't want me anywhere near. It was too close of a relationship in his mind. I mean, he never said it, but it was clear that by the questions he asked, that I guess he felt it was just too close of a relationship. He didn't want. I think he felt I'd be more beholden to the board member than I would be to him. C'est la vie. They hired somebody, in my opinion, was less experienced, but it's just the way it worked. It was no big deal, but it was an interesting to go in there and like, oh, I got referred by, you think that would be a good referral, right? The chairman of a board member, chairman of the audit committee would be a really good referral to but in this case it worked against me. So just show you that that's a balancing act. So just a quick overview of how the finance department relates in various areas, just to kind of level set and get some good background in how you may interact with the finance department in the future.